Shankar's Vivek Chudamani, presented by Svayam Prakash Sharma. Vivek Chudamani, or the crest jewel of discrimination and discernment, is an introduction to the Vedanta that was written by Shankaracharya. It is the essence of the Upanishads and the Bhagawad Gita. It consists of 581 verses. For convenience, it is being presented in 20 parts. Source material for these uploads has been taken from talks on Shankar's Vivek Chudamani by Swami Chinmayanand as published by the Central Chinmaya Trust. Part 1, verses 1 to 27. Part 1 consists of verses 1 to 27, where Shankar tells about the glory of spiritual life, about the miseries of the unspiritual person, about the means of wisdom, about who is a fit student for seeking the Atma, and about the 4 qualifications of the fit student or discipline who seeks the Atma. Vivek Chudamani. I salute my Guru, Sadguru Gaur Govind, who is of the nature of absolute bliss, who can be known only through the true meaning of the Vedanta, and who is beyond the known instruments of perception. A human birth is indeed rare for all human beings, and having obtained a human birth, it is even much more difficult to live a complete and full life. And then, after having gained these 2 rare chances, it is even more rare to maintain steadfastness on the path of spiritual activity, as has been explained in the Vedanta. And even rarer than this is to have a true and correct knowledge of the deep significances and of the hidden meaning of the scriptures. The ability to distinguish and differentiate between the real and the unreal, a practical experience of the spiritual glory, and eventually to get established in this living consciousness that the self or the Atma that is in me is in fact the very self, the very same self, or the very same Atma that is in all and everyone. But all these only come later, and they culminate, they end in a person's liberation, they end in a person's salvation. It should also be understood that this kind of perfect liberation for a person is just not possible without the earned merits of 100 crore or 1 billion lives that have been lived intelligently. Being born as a human being, having a burning desire for liberation or salvation, and the capacity to surrender completely to a person of wisdom. These 3 things are very rare indeed. And if and whenever these 3 qualities are found in any person, it must be understood that they are due to the grace of the God Almighty. Will there be such a foolish person who, despite having gained a human body, and despite having a complete knowledge of the scriptures, still does not strive for realization of the self or the Atma? If indeed there is such a person, then he in fact commits suicide by clinging to things that are not real, but that are unreal. There can be no greater fool than the person who, in spite of having got the rare chance of a human birth, and in spite of having got the excellent qualities of the head and the heart, who still falls short of his efforts to discover himself. Learned scholars may well quote all the scriptures. All the gods may be invoked through those scriptures. Elaborate rituals may be performed. Personal gods may be propitiated. All this, however, will never result in liberation or salvation of a person. Even if he were to keep on doing this for the lifespan of 100 Brahmas put together. Liberation or salvation can only be obtained when a person experiences oneness or unity with the self or the Atma. When a person identifies himself with the self of the Atma, when he realizes, when he experiences that he is in fact the Atma, then and then only can a person achieve liberation or salvation. It must be clearly understood that liberation cannot be the result of good works. That is, liberation can never be attained just by good works, as Shruti itself declares that there is no scope for immortality by means of wealth. That being the case, the learned scholar who strives to gain freedom from within and who has renounced all his desires for pleasures in the sense objects, such a scholar should duly approach a good and generous teacher or guru. And then he should live a life that is attuned to the true meanings of the words of that teacher or guru. Then, through continuous and well-established discrimination, he should attain the state of Yog Rood, a state of one who is stable in Yog. Then, having attained the state of Yog Rood, one should lift oneself up from the ocean of change and finite existence in which one is drowning. One should raise oneself up from that low level of existence. The wise and learned person should give up all actions that are motivated by desires. Then, having given up all actions that are motivated by desires, one should start the practice of rediscovering the self or the Atma. And thereby, one should attain freedom from the bondage of birth and death. It must be clearly understood that while selfless works and acts of charity do indeed purify the mind, they do not by themselves result in the knowledge of the reality of the Atma, nor do they by themselves contribute to the perception of that reality. The knowledge of the self or the Atma is brought about only and only by discriminative analysis. It can never be brought about by any number of selfless actions or by any number of charitable works or actions. Because of delusion, when we see a snake in a rope, because of delusion, when we mistake a rope for a snake, then it causes fear and sorrow. And the fear and sorrow that is caused by such delusion can only be ended when we ascertain the truth of the rope, when we realize that the rope is just a rope, it's not the snake, which can be done only through steady and balanced thinking. Taking baths in sacred spots, giving away large amounts of charity, or even doing hundreds of pranayams, none of these activities can ever give a person the knowledge of his or her own self or Atma. However, A firm experience of the self or the Atma can be gained when we send our thoughts along the path of the arguments that have been laid down in the salutary advices of the wise. It must be understood that ultimate success in spiritual efforts depends entirely upon the degree of fundamental qualifications of the seeker. Ancillary conveniences such as time and place also play a role, but they are only of secondary value and importance. They have very little fundamental value. Therefore, after duly approaching a guru who is himself well established in the experience of the self or the Atma, and who is an ocean of kindness, the seeker of the self or the Atma should learn to inquire and to meditate. And who is the person who is fit for seeking Atma Vidya, for seeking knowledge of the self or the Atma? A person who is fit for seeking and receiving Atma Vidya or knowledge of the Atma should be one who has the following qualities. He should have a keen memory and a good knowledge of the world outside, as well as a good understanding of the world within. He should know the scriptures well enough to be able to argue for the scriptures and also to refute arguments against them. Such a person is fit to receive knowledge of the Atma. Only such a person is qualified to inquire after the supreme reality of the Atma, who has the qualities of discrimination, of detachment, of calmness, etc., and who has a burning desire for liberation. Great sages have also spoken of 4 essential qualifications, which, if they are present in a person, can help him in realizing Brahma or the Atma. But if these 4 essential qualities are not present in a person, then the person will not be able to realize his goal of attainment of Brahma or the Atma, no matter how hard he or she tries. And what are these essential 4 qualities that a person must have to realize Brahma or the Atma? These are, first, the ability to discriminate, the ability to distinguish and differentiate between the real and the unreal. The second quality is the spirit of detachment from the enjoyment of the fruits of his actions. The third is the group of 6 essentials, which are Sam, Dam, Uprati, Titiksha, Shraddha, and Samadhan. And last but not least, the person must have within himself, within him, a burning desire for liberation. He must have the spirit of mumukshata. Now, each of these 4 essential qualities is discussed briefly. When we say that the person must have the ability to discriminate, the ability to distinguish and differentiate between the real and the unreal, we mean that he should have a firm conviction of the intellect that the Brahma alone, that the Atma alone is real, and that everything else, including the phenomenal world, is unreal. It is this that constitutes the quality of discrimination. Next, we come to detachment. Detachment is the giving up of all transitory enjoyments that a person has through the sense organs. That is, giving up all the transitory enjoyments that a person has through seeing, through talking and hearing, through touching, through tasting, and through smelling. He should also give up all the experiences that he has gained through any form of equipments, ranging from the mortal human body to the form of God Brahma himself. This is what is called detachment. Next are the 6 essentials: Sam, Dam, Uprati, Titiksha, Shraddha, and Samadhan. First is Sam. Sam is the peaceful state of mind, is the calm of the mind, where the mind rests constantly on the contemplation of the goal, which is the Atma, which it does when the person has again and again detached himself from the chaos of the sense objects through the process of continuous observation of their defects. This is what is called Sam. Next is Dham, or self-control, which is the process of steering both kinds of organs, the organs of perception of knowledge and the organs of action, steering both these away from their respective sense objects and placing them in the center of their respective activities. The next essential is Uparati, or self-withdrawal, which is that condition of thought waves in which the thought waves are free from the influence of external objects. That is, withdrawing the thought waves from the influence of all external objects. The next essential, Titiksha, is the capacity to endure all sufferings without seeking any redress or revenge. In this condition, one is always free from anxiety, in sorrow and in suffering, and one does not lament over them. The next essential is Shraddha. The wise call Shraddha that quality by which one understands the exact meaning of the scriptures as well as the hidden meanings of the words of the Guru, which he does by having complete faith in the Guru. It is by Shraddha alone that reality becomes manifestly clear. The last essential is Samadhan, or tranquility. Samadhan is the condition of the mind when the mind is constantly engaged in the total contemplation of the Supreme Reality. It is a state of poise and tranquility of the mind. When the mind is sufficiently trained to enjoy enormously, being continuously fixed in the concept of the perfect ideal, which is the Atma, which is at once both universal as well as omnipotent. This state cannot be gained through any amount of intellectual exercises. The final quality or qualification for a seeker of truth, or the Atma, that a person must have is the quality of mumukshita. And what is mumukshita? Mumukshita is the impatient and burning desire to release oneself from all bondages of egoism to the body, etc., which bondages are created by ignorance, which is done by realizing the real and true nature of oneself or one's Atma. Yes, it is the burning desire to release oneself from all the bondages that are created by ignorance, by realizing the real and true nature of one's self or Atma. This concludes the first part of Shankara's Vivek Chudamani, consisting of verses 1 to 27. Om Shanti, 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 Om.